Hi and welcome to the second session of our Garageband tutorial, and I'm going to start off today by quickly recapping what we went through last session. I'm going to very quickly go through. If you need to install Garageband, go to the App Store and type in Garageband, get it on. It's free at the moment. As you can see, I've already got the icon here, so I'm going to press on that to open it. Now, one of the things with Garageband that can be a little bit confusing is it always opens on the last thing you did. So if you do find you're on a screen and you need to get yourself back to the menu screen, you need to always go to the top left corner, press on that, and this brings you back to here. Now, if I wanted to open a piece of previous work, I can tap on any of those, but to create a new piece, press on the add sign on the top right-hand corner. All right, so this brings us onto our instrument selector, so we can scroll through that and look at the different ones. Last session we went through how to put those in, so I'm going to very quickly set up, get myself to the point we got to by the end of last session's work. So by scrolling through the instrument selector, we're going to start by adding in Smart Guitar. So tap on Smart Guitar. Last time we just used the one chord, so we used the chord of C, and we looked at using the autoplay function, autoplay 1, 2, 3 and 4 on the chords. So choose one of those, choose the timbre of guitar we want. I'm going to stick to acoustic for the moment, and then very simply make sure the arrow at the top on the timeline is at the beginning, and press the red button to record and let it record through. Once it's recorded through that, I'm then going to use the texture selector button at the top to show that we've recorded that. Remember, we can slide out the mixer controls. We'll talk some more about that later on in the session. And then to add in the rest of the layers, we can either choose by going to the instrument selector button at the top, looks like a robot with robot ears, or the add a track layer button at the bottom. So I'm going to tap on that. And next I'm going to add in bass. Now I'm not going to bore you by going through this all again. I'm going to very quickly add these in, very similar. Autoplay, choose one of those, choose your timbre of bass, and then record it in. Remember, it needs to be the same chord. As you can see, the arrow isn't quite at the beginning, so just take that back to the start. Start it off, red button to record. Okay, back to my selector, my texture button again, add in my next layer, and then we looked at adding, it doesn't really matter which order we do this in, but I'm going to add in smart strings, and remembering that smart strings are slightly different because we also are able to choose the genre, the style of the strings that we play, as well as the autoplay rhythm choice. So we'll go with cinematic, start it off. Remember, we can also toggle in the different instruments of the string session on and off by tapping on them. We'll keep them all in for the moment. So start it off, arrow at the beginning. So 2 more layers to put in of the remaining 2 smart instruments. And we're going to have a look next. We'll scroll through, put drums in a moment. We'll go to keyboard. Smart piano. Now, of course, there's many different timbres. We can choose the keyboard, organs, and electric pianos, and acoustic pianos, and synthesizers, but we'll just stick for the moment to a normal grand piano. Tap on that, choose our autoplay, and remember we can choose whether to have the right and left hand playing together. We can choose the left hand lower pitch notes, the right hand pitch notes are both together. So record that in. And last but not least, we're going to go on and add in some smart drums. So smart drums, which brings up the grid. Choose your timbre of drum kit or drum machine, and then drag these in. Remember, it's loudest at the top, quietest at the bottom, simple on the left, complex on the right. So we're going to put in the key elements of our drum kit to build up the sound. And remember, as we go on, we can also add them in as it's recording. So bring that back to the start and record our final layer. And as it goes on, we can add some claps, maybe some shaker, and perhaps some cymbal at the end. Okay, so that brings us, if we look at our texture view again, that brings us to basically where we ended last time's session. The only thing we also talked about was how to use the mixer. So when you're listening back to it, perhaps particularly if you have headphones on, you might want to balance up the mixer. It's automatically set on about 3/4 volume, the dynamics are, so I wouldn't recommend moving those too much either way. Otherwise you start to lose the overall dynamic of the piece. So as we listen, I think piano's maybe a little too loud, so we'll turn that down a bit. Drums perhaps down a little. I think that's just about right. So that brings us to the start of our second session. So if you completed last time's session, session 1, you will already have some saved work. So I'm going to go back to this screen and open up GarageBand again. And remember, it takes us to, it might open on the menu screen. If it doesn't open on a menu screen, you want to tap the top left-hand button to take you back to that menu. And then you can find they are automatically dated. If you want to rename your piece of work, you can carefully tap on the text, which automatically comes up with my song and a number, and rename it. So if we wanted to call it session 1, and then it has successfully renamed that. So then if I want to reopen that piece of work, I just tap on it and then I can continue. Now this sounds really good. I like this. We've got 5 layers. We've mixed it a little bit as well, but the only problem is, however good it sounds, it's very, very short. I've timed this, it's 8 bars long, but at this tempo it lasts maybe about 16 or 17 seconds, which is obviously very, very short for a piece of music or a song. So what we need to do today's session, we're going to start to look at how to structure our song to make it longer. And the key thing is not to bore people, because of course I could just repeat this over and over again, which would make it longer, but people would very soon start to lose interest, however good it sounds. So first thing we need to do is to introduce ourselves to this button here. There's yet another add sign to add, and this is the section menu. So at the moment, this screen is section A. We have 8 bars, 8 lots of measure of 4. So if I add that, it brings up the section menu, tells me section A, 8 bars long. So bringing up the section menu introduces us to really our options. So we've got section A, and if I tap on that, we can change the how long that section is, the number of bars in that. If you wanted to record freestyle, if you press it to automatic, it will just keep recording and add as many bars as you need. But if you manually want to enter the number of bars, you would increase and decrease it using the arrows there. I'm going to leave it on 8 for the moment, but this is the option I'm most interested in because we have a choice of duplicating or adding another section. The difference between these is if you duplicate section A, you will get another identical section, including the loops that we've already recorded in the 8-bar sections. If we add a new section, we get a brand new section, but it's empty of sound. We'd still have the layers, the instruments would still be there because it's continuing over this way, but these loops will not be visible. What I'd like to do today is to actually duplicate this 4 times to create 5 section piece. So it's going to be 40 bars in total, 5 times 8, and which will make it a much more lengthy piece of music. And then I'm going to show you some tricks of how we can, without adding in extra instruments or messing about too much, keep people interested. So let's start by duplicating our first section. So if we duplicate once, you can now see underneath there that we have section A and then section B underneath here. Now, Garageband on the iPad takes a little bit of getting used to with how to view the different sections. If you want to work on one section at a time, you would highlight section A or section B and then tap on the black space underneath to zoom into that. So if I wanted to see section B, it's highlighted, tap on the black underneath and it zooms into that. If I then want to come back out to it, I'll go to my section menu again, I could change to section A, tap and zoom into that. A quick way to move between them is to swipe across. It takes a little bit of practice. There we are. So there's section B, section A, and you can see at the top we've got bars 1 to 8. At the top we've got bars 9 to 16. If I want to see the whole piece of music on the screen at one time, I would go to my section menu and tap on all sections and then tap underneath. And now I can see section A, very tiny section, letter A there, and a tiny section, letter B there. Okay, so now we know how to duplicate and view those different sections. I'm going to create 5 sections in total. I've got 2, so section A, section B. I'm going to go on to here, and then I'm going to duplicate again. Now, if you notice, the duplicate button has been grayed out at the moment, and that's because the iPad doesn't know which section you want to actually duplicate. So I need to tell it by highlighting which one I want to make a copy of. Now, as it happens, these are identical, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to go on to section B and I need to create a section, duplicate to create section C, section D and section E. Now if we go to all sections and view that, we can now see section A, B, C, D and E. The problem with the iPad screen is it's obviously a little bit small to work on accurately. So that's why it gives you the opportunity to zoom right into each of these sections. So we're going to start now and talk about how, if we played that through for 40 bars of the same thing, people are going to get really quite bored of that. So we need to really find ways of tricking the listener into thinking things are changing without actually changing too much. The temptation would be to just add in more and more and more instruments, but that's okay, but it can get a bit too much. So we're going to keep it to 5 tracks and find different ways of keeping the listener interested. And at the end of the day, it's just the chord of C. Now at this point, before I go any further, I actually want to backtrack a little bit because I've duplicated these sections. I've shown you how to duplicate those, but actually I really wanted to do something to section A before doing that duplication. So this gives me an opportunity to show you ways of how to edit mistakes. So what I want to do now is I want to get back to just having section A, do some work on that, and then duplicate the changes. So I'm going to show you by going to the section menu. If I've created these sections, I go, actually, I've made some mistakes, I want to get rid of these. I can use the edit button at the top. And then to delete the sections I don't want, I can just tap on the red box, the red circle, and then use the delete options. So I'm going to just quickly delete section E, D, C, and B. So that just gives me out just my original section A again. And I'm now going to show you how to edit this because they are in 8-bar chunks. What I'd like to do is actually to chop them up into what I call Lego blocks. So of 2-bar chunks, which makes it much, much easier to work with when we are tinkering with it. So first thing I want to do is to highlight the whole lot. So there are different ways of highlighting sections. You can tap on each of the blocks and that highlights one at a time. You can highlight more than one by using 2 fingers, press on the one, and then while that one's still being held, tap on any other ones that you want to highlight. And then finally, to highlight the whole lot on the screen at once, tap on the black, bring up the select all option, and very quickly highlight like that. Now I want to split all of these into 2-bar chunks. So I'm going to move my line onto bar 3. So bar 1, bar 2. Now I'm going to, because it's all highlighted, I'm going to tap and tap again to bring up the menu option. And I'm then going to use the split function. Be careful not to use cut because that does something different. So we're going to split that, which brings up a pair of scissors. Now I'm going to pull the scissors down to split. Now the scissors will only go down for one track depth, but because everything's highlighted, it will split all the highlighted tracks. So if I pull that down and release, you can see now that has been split straight the way down on there. Now if I move it across to bar 5, pull down, I can split there. Bar 7, oh, made a mistake. One other option, made a bit of a mistake there, is I can go to the undo arrow to undo the last thing, just like you would on Word or similar apps. So I need to re-highlight everything, move it across to bar 7, and then bring up the split option, the split function again, and then chop that down. So now I have got what looks like a brick wall. At this point now, I'm going to reduplicate them. So now I'm going to create my sections A, B, C, D, and E, but this time they're going to be copies of this brick wall version. So duplicate, sorted. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to focus on section A. This is really at the introduction part of the structure of the song. So I'm going to go to my section menu and highlight section A because it's a bit bewildering to look at all of that together. Zoom into section A. So little tricks to keep the listener interested. First thing we can do is to bring in each of the instruments one at a time. So it creates like a stepped view. And we're basically like a staggered entry for each of these instruments. So first thing I need to do is choose which order of the instruments I want to put in. So if I want the guitar to come in first, I would hold on the guitar until it sticks to my finger. You can see that's lifted itself off the track, and I can now move the whole track down, up and down to whichever position I want. Now I think I'm going to go with the drums last. I'm going to start with some strings, and then piano, then bass, then guitar, then drums. So I can always rearrange this afterwards. So once I've done that, then what I want to do is to actually create a step structure of this section. So each of them comes in every 2 bars. So the first instrument is going to be the strings. So I'm going to leave that track exactly as it is. So I'm going to move to the piano. And on the piano, I want the first 2 bars to be gone. So by pressing on, highlighting that first Lego block, the first 2 bars of the piano, I can tap on it and then bringing up the menu, and then pressing delete will then remove any highlighted blocks. So that one goes. If I've made a mistake, of course, I can undo that with the arrow here. So I actually want to remove all of those. So I could do that individually, but it is possible to actually get rid of more than one at the same time by pressing, holding, and then with that finger still held, tapping additional blocks, selecting whichever ones you want, and then all of those can be removed together. So I want to remove these 3. So those are highlighted, tap again, bring up that menu and delete. So in this part, I want strings first, then strings and piano, the strings, bass, piano, strings, piano, bass, drum, guitar, and then so it creates that sort of steps. So let's get rid of these 3, tap, and then these 2, and I could actually add this one in as well. So we get rid of those as well. And there we go. Section A complete. So now if I move to section B, I have a choice there. Now at this point, I would leave this as it is. So now we've got the drums coming in, and then we've got 8 bars of all 5 instruments. We should be able to keep people's interest long enough with that without actually doing anything to that for 8 bars. And then moving on to section C. Now section C, I could start to play with this a little bit. It's going to get a little bit boring if I leave it exactly like this. So perhaps I could just pair up different instruments now. I'd probably put a bit more thought into this if I had more time, but I'm just going to say we'll have a little bit of a solo guitar part, perhaps. So we'll remove those. Then I might bring the bass guitar in for this bit. I might just go with just the strings for one. Obviously, I'd probably put more thought into it than this, really. And then I'm going to bring everything back in just before we get to section D. If I press on my section menu, I can go to all sections and have a look. This is what we've got so far. So I've got my section A going in, 8 bars of section B where we hear everything all together, and then that slightly odd section D, which perhaps section C, which might need a little bit more work, leading into section D, which we'll talk about next. Now we're going to have a look at section D now, and this is one of my favourite parts of the more recent versions of GarageBand, and that's using this button up here that says FX. GarageBand includes some pretty advanced DJ filters and effects that you can use to really change the sound, and I'm just going to show you those, but the best thing you could possibly do with this is to just have a good play with it and try and find some stuff that you enjoy doing. It definitely needs practice before you actually record this. So I'm going to show you some stuff that I've worked out on this already. So we're going to go into section D to use the FX filters. So I'm going to go to the section menu and zoom into section D, tap at the bottom. And here we've got our block of all 5 tracks, all in for 8 bars. So opening up the effects menu brings up this at the bottom. We've got a number of different ones, and as I say, the best thing you can do with this is just have a little play with it, try the things out, but I'll just give you a little bit of a quick demonstration of what each of these things do. We've got, if I press play, so nothing's recording at the moment, we can hear that. So first of all, we've got a filter. So we've got a square wave. Got reverse button, a little bit of old school scratching with 2 speeds, and a stop button with 2 functions, a slow stop and a sudden stop. We've got a sine wave, and finally a repeater. I'm going to show you one that I've tried with a little combination of these that I find usually works quite well with an 8-bar phrase. With just 8 bars, it's actually very tricky to get all of these in. So you might just want to have a little play, little practice, and I'm sure you can come up with something better than I have. So if I turn off the effects now, you can see that recorded effects has actually been added as an additional track at the bottom, which can be toggled on or off. I'm going to leave that on and have a quick look at what it looks like at the moment. Here we've got section A, B, C, D, and E. If I look at all sections, you can now see we've got one final section left to do, section E. Now I'm going to keep section A pretty simple, and I'm going to finish off by doing the opposite of what we did at the start with section A by creating these steps but actually coming back out of it, so we end up with what looks like an Aztec step pyramid at the end. So going into section E, zoom into that. So remember, I'm going to do it all in one go this time, so I'm going to get rid of all of the drums. Remember, highlighting, keeping that finger pressed. Bringing these out, all the ones I want to lose. So we're going to finish with just the strings on their own. Tap, and then delete that chunk. And we've got a finished piece of music. So we've got 40 bars. It's not perfect. I would probably like to have spent a little bit longer, particularly on section C, but it will keep people interested because there's enough changes to stop them from getting bored. The last thing I would do is just a recap of just looking at my mixer settings, have a good listen to it, preferably on headphones, and see if any of those need adjusting at any point. So whether anything's too loud or too quiet. And there we go. So all that's left to do is to switch off the metronome if it's on and just have a good listen through. Next session, we're going to be developing this. We're going to be practicing a little bit more, doing some recap on it, because of course, with any musical thing, we need to make sure we can practice it and get it really efficient. But we're going to be looking at using more than one chord, or using chord progressions, and how we can combine that with this structure work that we've done to create even more interesting pieces of music, leading into creating our own songs.